The U.S. congressman who's led the charge on the legislative amendments in the U.S. House of Representatives seeking to give India a waiver against arms sanctions is Ro Khanna. He's a Democrat, Indian-American representative from California, member of the U.S. Armed Services Committee, joining us live in the news track. Congressman, welcome, and it's great to have you with us on India Today.
Thank you. An honor to be on.
And thank you for your leadership in helping with these CAATSA sanctions. There's a lot of concern in India around the Countering America's Adversaries through Sanctions Act or CAATSA, and whether the US government will impose these sanctions on India because of the purchase of the S-400 missile defense system. You're now trying to ensure that this CAATSA sanction is not imposed against India. Can you give our viewers a sense of why you believe giving India exemption from CAATSA sanctions, which have been invoked in the cases of countries like Turkey, which also are seen as important allies of the United States? Why is this a priority for you and for the Democrat government?
Well, the United States-India defense partnership, economic partnership, is one of the most important in the 21st century. It's a partnership of democracies. It's a partnership to make sure that we don't see the expansionist ambitions of China in Taiwan or on the Indian border. It's a partnership that is necessary in the long run even to check Putin and Putin's advance. So this waiver, which passed overwhelmingly in the House of Representatives, over 300 votes in the House of Representatives, is an affirmation of the U.S.-India strategic alliance.
After this, the CAATSA waivers are also required to go through the Senate. Can you give our viewers a sense of the mood among senators? And naturally, each will have his own opinion. But is it your sense that, like in the Congress, there was overwhelming support for these sanctions, that's likely to be the case in the Senate as well?
Well, Rahul, as you know, ultimately the decision of whether to waive the sanctions lie with President Joe Biden. One of the things that the House overwhelmingly voting for this waiver shows is that it gives the president the impetus to waive the sanctions and waive it quickly. In the Senate, there are many who also believe that the sanctions should be waived. They actually don't have to vote to pass it. What happens is you have a conference committee, and the House version, which has the waiver, will be part of it, and the Senate bill will be part of it. The Senate doesn't have the waiver because it passed earlier. And then the committee chairs will decide whether the waiver stays in the final bill. Obviously, we're working to ensure that the waiver stays in the final bill. That would be ideal. But regardless of whether it does, it is an overwhelming signal from the Congress to the President of the United States.
And do you have any sense at all of how President Biden views these sanctions against India? He's spoken of India being an important partner to the United States, but there was no clarity before you moved these legislative amendments on how the American government would act on these sanctions and whether they'd proactively work towards giving a waiver.
Well, let me just say this. We've been in touch with very senior members of the White House. They welcomed the amendment. Had the administration not welcomed the amendment, it would never have gotten the kind of support it did in the House of Representatives. So we did this in coordination with very senior people in the President's foreign policy team. And I think that the President now knows, his team now knows, that there's a lot of support in the Congress for the President to have this waiver. But Raul, one other point is worth making. This is the first significant vote in the House of Representatives in affirming the U.S.-India alliance since, I would argue, the India civilian nuclear deal. Mm-hmm. In between, there have been a lot of things that the executive branch has done, but this is getting people in Congress on the record saying that the relationship is very important.
Now that's interesting, because this comes at a time when India has had its own position on the Russia-Ukraine war, and there was some concern that not towing Washington's lines may have some consequences for Delhi, despite India taking an independent policy on the Russia-Ukraine war. You've gone out of the way to help with these legislative amendments. Why have you done that, and what does that say, according to you, about the mood in the U.S. House of Representatives?
Well, I think I had the credibility because I was critical of India's abstention in the United Nations. I believe that we should be condemning Putin, that what he's doing in Ukraine is is unconscionable. But when you have important strategic relationships, we can speak candidly about differences, but ultimately we need to strengthen that relationship. And I think I had the confidence of a lot of colleagues because they know I'm an independent voice. They know that I have been critical at times of policies where I disagree, but I was able to convince them that ultimately the U.S.-India relationship is so important for liberal democracy in the 21st century, and that's really what carried the day in the House of Representatives.